Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. Smith, and this is 1.25 Solving Quadratic Equations Part 1 of a two-part lesson. We will be doing Part 2 next week. We're going to explain how to solve by factoring first. So solve equations, find the values of the variable that make the equation true. This is basically a review of what we did at the beginning of the year, except now we're including quadratic relations instead of just linear relations. So the solutions to ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 are the zeros of the parabola. So you're going to need to factor the formula. So to solve by factoring, first you eliminate the terms from one side of the equation. That's step 1. Step 2 is factoring. Step 3 is the zero product property. So that is basically set your brackets in your factored form to 0. And then you can check the answer by summing into the original equation. We're not going to do that for all of them. We are going to do it for at least one example so that you can see very clearly how to do that. That's just review of what we did at the beginning of the year as well, solving and checking. Okay, here's our first example. Solve for the following equations. In equation 1, we already have x minus 5, so in brackets, and then bracket x plus 7 equals 0. So what this actually means is you take your first bracket here, and that implies, and that's what that implies symbol is. It's like an equal sign and then an arrowhead to just kind of point. That means this implies that x minus 5 equals 0. Because if one of these brackets equals 0, when you multiply it, you'll have 0 times something. So it'll be 0 in the end. So if we have x minus 5 equals 0, that means that x equals 5 is one of the solutions. We also have in the other set of brackets, if I change color, let's use green, x plus 7. Sorry, I forgot my implies symbol. X plus 7 equals 0. That means that x equals negative 7. Because if x is negative 7, the second set of brackets is going to be 0. And when you multiply by 0, you get 0 back. If we look at the next example, we have 2x and x plus 3. So if we use just the 2x here, I have 2x equals 0, which just means x equals 0 because you divide both sides by 2. I'm going to switch colors again just to illustrate this a little bit clearer. I'll use blue this time. We have x plus 3. This implies that x plus 3 equals 0 because we just set the brackets to equal 0. And if x plus 3 equals 0, that means that x equals negative 3. So we have two solutions, one here and one over here. And this is true for all of the quadratic relations that we have in these examples, is we'll have two solutions. Sometimes you might only have one, sometimes you might have 0. But in these cases, we have 2. Moving on to the next set of equations, I'm going to change this back to black. And what you actually have to do is you have to collect like terms. This should be review from before. Basically, you're going to move your x squared over, you're going to move your negative, or your positive 10 over, that'll become negative. And then you'll end up with 2x squared minus x squared because it came over. Then minus 9x, minus 12, then minus 10. And then that equals 0. Then you just have to collect like terms and then factor. So if we collect like terms, we have x squared minus 9x minus 22 equals 0. Now I'm going to ask you what multiplies to give you negative 22, what adds to get you negative 9, and what are the numbers. If you said negative 11 and positive 2, you are correct. So now we are just left with this x minus 11 times x plus 2, and that equals 0. And same idea as before, except now we factored first. We take our first set of brackets set to equal 0, so this implies that x minus 11 equals 0, which in turn just means that x equals positive 11. And same idea for the second set of brackets. If I'm using green, almost lost my pen there. If I'm using green, that implies that x plus 2 equals 0, which just means x equals negative 2. That's all there is to it. Collect like terms, factor, and then solve for x. Set the brackets to equal 0 and solve for x. It's really not that complicated. If you know how to factor, this is really straightforward. Let's do another example very similar to that, with the exception that when we move the negative x squared over, it's going to become positive. We move the 5x over, that's going to become negative, and then negative 60 becomes positive. And when you collect like terms, I'm going to jump a step just to save us a little bit of time because you don't need to see how to do this every single time. Negative x becomes positive x squared, so we got 2x squared now. Plus 20x, because 25x minus 5x. And then negative 12 plus 60 will be plus 48. So that equals 0. Now, we factor like we normally would. We might have to use the Xbox method or the modified man method, whatever you prefer. In this case, we actually just take out a common factor of 2, and we're left with x squared plus 10x plus 24 equals 0. So now we use our multi-bracket method or man method, if you want to call it that. M multiplies to 24, adds to 10. Well, two numbers add to 10 and multiply to 24. Well, it should be 6 and 4. So then you have this new factored form here, x plus 6 and x plus 4 equals 0. So this is going to imply two things. X is going to equal two separate things. I'll use one different color this time. And it just implies that x is going to equal either negative 6 or negative 4, because you have to set both brackets to equal 0. So you can jump to that conclusion from there. I'm not going to make you write out the steps every single time. I just did that for the first three to kind of show you how it works, and I skipped it this time to speed things along. Now, we're to check the answers from the last question that we did. So what we do for this is we're going to check for x equals 6 to start, and our left side is going to be different from our right side, right? So we start with our left side first, or it shouldn't be by the time we get to the end. Start with our left side, which is just negative 6 squared plus 25 times negative 6 minus 12. I'm going to do some calculations. Negative 6 squared is 36, positive 36. 25 times negative 6 is negative 150 minus 12. Do some quick arithmetic, and you should get negative 126. Okay, that's our left side. Let's try our right side. We're just going to sub in x equals 6 for our right side now, and then we should get negative 126 by the end. So negative 6 squared plus 5 times negative 6 minus 60, which just equals negative 36 minus 30 minus 60, which just gives you negative 126. Perfect. Okay, left side equals right side. That means that this is checked. X is equal to negative 6, or equal to, negative 6. Now we're going to check the other solution where x equals -4. I am going to speed this up a little bit because you guys have seen this a few times, and I think that the last one should be enough review. So our left side equals -4 squared plus 25 times -4 minus 12. And that just equals -96. Okay, same idea for the right side. On our right side, we have -x squared, so it'd be -4 squared plus 5 times -4 minus 60, which just means that this is just -96. All right, we are done. Left side equals right side. We can check off our solution here. And that's how you check your solutions. Our next set of examples, we have 2x minus 1 and x plus 1. Very, very straightforward from what we learned before, except now we might end up with fractions. So I'm going to use red to illustrate this. In red here, we have 2. Implies that 2x minus 1 equals 0. The 1's going to go over. You divide by 2. X equals 1/2. And you can sub in 1/2, and you should see that that set of brackets will equal 0. And our next one, I'll use green. We have x plus 1. This just implies that x plus 1 equals 0 because we're setting the bracket to equal 0. Oh, let me fix that. That looks a little messy. Zero. There we go. And we get x equals -1. So our two solutions are -1 and x equals +1/2. Same idea for the next set. If I use green for the first one, I have 2x equals 0, which just means x equals 0. Okay, now let's say blue. There we go. This implies that 4x plus 3 equals 0. The 3 goes over, becomes negative. Then you have x equals -3/4. Because when the 3 goes over, it becomes negative. You divide both sides by 4, you get -3/4. So there's your two solutions for this set. Now we're going to get into a set of solutions that uses the Xbox method. You can use the modified man method to solve these if you want. I'm going to stick with the X in the box method because I think that those are a little bit easier for most students to understand. Just because it's a little bit more visual as opposed to just a bunch of numbers to crunch. Okay. I'm going to switch over to black because we're moving things around. So the x goes over, and the 15 goes over, and we're stuck with 6x squared minus x minus 15. Then we're going to set up our x in our box. So our x, 6 times -15 should give us -90. Then our b value is -1. So now I ask, what multiplies to -90, adds to -1? One's negative, one's positive. Well, -10, +9. Okay, so we have our boxes we can set up now. So the a value, 6x squared, minus 10 over here, 10x, and then 9x. And then our c value, -15. Perfect. So we collect our like terms. I get 2x here. And -3 is my greatest common factor. for that. And then I use vertical, the columns, 3x would be my greatest common factor here, plus, oh, it's going to be a negative, so negative 5. There we go. So now I have this new factored form that's going to look like 3x minus 5 times 2x minus 3. And that equals 0. So what this means is I'm going to have two solutions. The spacing's a little awkward, so I'll use red to highlight here, or underline here. 3. This implies that 3x minus 5 equals 0, which means x equals 5 over 3. And then I'll use green for the second one, 2x minus 3. So I have, this implies that 2x minus 3 is going to equal 0. 3 goes over, becomes positive, divide both sides by 2, so I get, the 3 goes over, becomes positive, and then divide both sides by 2, you should get x equals positive 3 over 2. And there's my two solutions for this set of equations, or this equation. I'm going to switch over to black ink, and we are going to have to take out a common factor. The greatest common factor between 6, 9, and 60 is 3. So if we take out a common factor of 3, we're stuck with 2x plus 3x minus 20. That equals 0. Okay, that's being taken care of. Should be able to carry on now. I set up my x now, just like I would before, except it's 2 times negative 20, so I get negative 40 up here. And then my b value is 3. What two values multiply to negative 40 add to positive 3? Well, if it's multiplying and it's negative, that means one's negative, one's positive. So I'll put my negative over here. I would say negative 5 and 8. And that works. Okay, we can now set up our box. So this will be 2x squared. Our next one, I can use negative 5x and 8x, and then I sub in my c value. My c value is negative 20. Perfect. Now I'm going to collect like terms. I get x and 4 here. And my other like terms, or common factors, keep saying like terms, I don't know why, 2x and 5. Okay, so now I'll have this new factored form, 2x minus 5 times x plus 4, because it's positive 4, and that equals 0. And just like we did before, you have your left set of brackets and your right set of brackets. I'll use red and green again, so red over here. That implies that 2x minus 5 equals 0, which then implies that x equals 5 over 2. Probably not the best spot to write that. Should have wrote it to the right. However, the show must go on. All right, we have x plus 4. So if we have, this implies x plus 4 equals 0, then we just say that x is equal to negative 4. And there's our two solutions, right there and right there. Perfect. We are set. Okay, that should be enough information of how to work through this. You're just basically factoring each set of brackets to equal 0, and that's the solution. Pretty straightforward stuff. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. We will carry on with part 2 next week. And we are approaching the end. In about 2 more weeks, we'll be done all of our lessons, and then I'll do a summative assignment, which just for the week, it'll be basically do this assignment, and I'll mark that and count it for marks. If you have any questions regarding that, please feel free to email me. If you have questions about the notes or the lesson or the practice, make sure you post it on the forum so that other students can see and answer. Best of luck, and I'll talk to you guys later.